Hi, everyone. It's Janice, host of the Divorcing Religion podcast. Thanks for tuning into my show, whether you're joining me on audio or video. I've heard from some folks recently who have told me just how much the show has meant, and some of them have even found it not only to be life-changing, but life-saving, as they felt there was no one else who understood what they were going through, and they found the Divorcing Religion podcast, and they started feeling encouraged. Please help me keep my show on the air. Become a member by clicking the join button on the Conference on Religious Trauma YouTube channel. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. My name is Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious trauma recovery coach. My guest today is Mick Larson. Mick is a documentary filmmaker, producer, and director. His documentary work is focused on social justice, politics, religion, and evolutionary psychology. Those are all favorites of mine. He also has a background in live sports production, working with all major American sports networks, as well as working directly with broadcast rights holders, such as the LA Dodgers, New York Yankees, Kansas City Royals, and Brooklyn Nets. That's pretty exciting. Mick produced the documentary series, What Would Jesus Do on Election Day? The series is currently available at www.wwjd.vote and will soon be available on Amazon and Apple streaming platforms. Mick produced this documentary from the angle of being an atheist ally of Jesus, agreeing with the basic teachings such as welcoming the stranger and caring for the sick and the poor, which are also values shared by liberals, progressives, and secular humanists. As an atheist and a Democrat, Mick poses a thought-provoking question in his documentary series. Would Jesus' message of love and grace align better with Republicans or Democrats? This question, among others, is designed to spark lively and insightful discussions, making the documentary a platform for intellectual engagement. Mick Larson has two other documentaries in production at the moment, and I think you're going to find these really interesting. The first is entitled America's Abortion Fetish: Conservatives Need to Control Women and Uphold Patriarchy. This documentary examines conservatives' use of the fetus as a Trojan horse to control women's sexuality and reproductive rights. The trailer can be viewed at www.abortionfetish.com. And the second documentary in production is entitled Alpha God, based on the book Alpha God by Dr. Hector Garcia, exploring why God is male and the historical ramifications of this creator male God. Viewers will recognize other familiar names from the atheist world like Michael Shermer, Dan Barker, Seth Andrews, Phil Zuckerman, and of course the author of Alpha God, Dr. Hector Garcia. You can watch the trailer at www.alphagod.world. And folks who are tuning into this podcast will recognize some of those names also as guests of the Divorcing Religion podcast. Welcome, Mick Larson. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Thanks, Janice. It's good to be on your show. And I'm curious, how many atheist allies of Jesus do you run into?
I feel like not very many. And I know when you first reached out to me and wanted to let me know about this project, I was a little hesitant. I thought, ooh, like how much of an ally? Like, are you really an atheist? These were questions that came up for me, and I felt quite reassured when we went back and forth a little bit. And then I even had the pleasure of watching that series that you put together. And I thought it was very thoughtful. And in fact, I know there's a part of me that can really kind of feel like I'm putting up my dukes and getting ready for a fight, even just watching a show where Christians are talking about their beliefs sometimes. And that's my own stuff coming to the surface. And the folks that you interviewed on that show were so thoughtful. I just really appreciated them. And I thought, you know what? Those are people that I could enjoy having in my life, even though our beliefs are quite different. So thank you for that on a personal note. I thought that was really valuable.
And I think the reason why, in my estimation, that you find those folks agreeable is because they're liberal Christians.
Yep.
They're progressive professors and authors. And I think the kind of a strange thing to think about is that, according to the Pew Research Center, 40% of liberals are atheists. And of those liberals that identify as atheists, 89% of them vote Democratic. 8% are unidentified, and only 3% vote Republican.
Wow.
So atheists and liberal Christians are teaming up to defeat basically conservative Christians, evangelicals, the KKK, white nationalists, white supremacists. So it's a very interesting concept that's happening.
It really is. It really is. And I have to say, so we're doing this interview on the heels of last night's debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. And I was so delighted, so impressed by that. And I'm Canadian. I'm over here in Canada, and we are feeling so much stress and strain over your upcoming election. And even in our house, we were talking about how we finally, there's a sense of hope again that possibly, not only Trump, but the GOP and all these different things that you just mentioned, white Christian nationalism, the KKK, these things once again can be defeated and put back where they belong, rather than being front and center and kind of threatening everybody. So we were really delighted with that. And I feel like the conversation you and I are having today is very timely.
Well, and, to get more back into the religion, and obviously people's religion affects their politics. But, I made this documentary to shame conservative Christians. And because as an atheist, I don't have a dog in this race or a horse in this race. And it's just like, if you really look at it objectively, I think the Democrats are actually following the teachings of Jesus because they're very basic. Take care of the sick and the poor. If Jesus was here today, like we talk about in my documentary series, he'd be advocating for healthcare for everybody. All the things, it's just basic taking care of other people.
Oh, yes. And, my business really started to take off after Trump came into office previously. And people my age and younger started noticing a real change in their parents as messages from the pulpits were shifting, as Christians seemed to becoming more and more angry, falling into the Fox News. I got my air quotes going around news there, and that whole cycle, and Rush Limbaugh and all those folks, and there was people coming to me saying, I don't recognize my parents anymore, and I don't recognize the religion that I was raised with. Where is the love? Where's the compassion and the mercy? Where is caring for the orphan and the widow, instead of putting up horrifying walls and wires and torture devices in the rivers to keep people from seeking safety in the United States of America, which is a beacon around the world, as a welcoming place where everybody can have a chance. And this is what I feel from Kamala Harris, that we're getting back to that again. She wants to get America back on track that way. So yeah, it has impacted my business for sure. I would like to know if you are comfortable sharing with us. So you've mentioned that you're an atheist. How did you grow up? Was religion a part of your life when you were growing up? How did you become an atheist?
Yeah, I grew up in a single parent home. With my mom, and I had an amazing childhood. It was full of sports, school, just having a great time. And my mom sent me to church, and we were in the United Methodist Church, so that was like the easiest, most benign. I always joke it's like a country club religion, like your business Republican kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So very laid back, and I think of it as, it's just like a sweet place to be as a kid, not knowing anything. But at the same time, I just really wasn't buying any of it. And I just saw a lot of hypocrisy. I sang in the choir growing up, went to youth camps and that kind of stuff. And, being, maybe 10 or 12 years old, going to a youth camp weekend, I was just naive and I thought we were there to learn about Jesus, and you look around and, people are drinking, doing drugs, having sex, what have you. Not everybody.
That is not Jesus camp. It's not the Jesus camp I'm used to.
Yeah. So I just saw a lot of hypocrisy. And I think I was just born being very skeptical and always questioning things. I know at our church, when I was a kid, they'd bring the kids up front and, do a child sermon, and they'd ask a question. And one time I raised my hand, I said, "Is it okay to tell a white lie?" So I totally embarrassed my mom, because my mom had told me, if someone calls and you answer the phone and they ask if your mother's home, tell them she is, but she can't come to the phone if she's not there, And so that was her version of a white lie, that it's okay to lie then. And so just things like that. But I was just extremely skeptical and just saw a lot of hypocrisy, and I just never was really buying it. So there wasn't really any huge moment that happened. It was just always just not really buying it,
So you never interpreted things literally. Any the stories, like, you weren't necessarily believing that there was a Noah and talking donkey and all those other great stories.
Yeah. And as you get older and you learn more and read more, you understand their parables, their stories to illustrate points. And, I can definitely easily say, yeah, I'm an atheist ally of Jesus because he makes a lot of good points. Do I think he's the Son of God? No. Do I think there's a God? No. It's just, I understand why people believe that there are. Every culture in the world has a religion. If we woke up tomorrow and there was no religion, we would make one up immediately, because that's just what humans do. We want answers to questions there's no answers to sometimes, and so we will make up the religion. And, this is a good question for you in your experience. I mean, religion provides a lot of security and hope for people. It gives them, understands their place in the world, and it helps them at an individual level. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I certainly support, my mom's spirituality, my daughter's spirituality, and my daughter's very involved in her church. But you know what? She's a liberal Christian. To get back that again. So my question to you is, do you see it religion having value for those people that are not experiencing any kind of trauma from their religion?
So I think that, well, for sure, like you just said, not everyone experiences trauma, or we can even say not everyone recognizes their trauma. But trauma itself is subjective. So two people might see a terrible accident, and one person says, "Wow, that's really terrible," and then they just carry on their way to work and they don't even think about it. And the other person literally falls to their knees and comes undone, and they are significantly experiencing trauma as a result of what they witness. And there are factors that kind of say whether or not, how likely the person is to have experienced it as a traumatizing event. I know some people who maybe are recovering from substance addiction or various other traumas that have gone on in life, and they can definitely seem to swap that addiction for a God addiction. And my concern is, I want people to know that they actually are capable of getting by without this magical belief. We do seem to need community, and I think that's the greatest benefit that comes from religious involvement, is participating, knowing your place, finding your place, feeling like you're a part of something, community is very, very powerful. But otherwise, I don't think it's necessarily helpful to teach people that they can't find the answers themselves. They have to pray to an all-knowing being. I don't think that teaches people to solve their problems or really encourages them to solve their problems. So, I don't see a huge amount of value in religion. I do see that it's very easily taken over and used as a controlling and manipulating force. But what we're talking about with, Jesus's endorsements to feed and clothe the poor and help people, that's great. If people can be encouraged to be behaving in that way, whatever it is that gets them to do those things, I'm glad that it's getting them to do those things. I think the problem with religion also really is the othering, the us versus them. You're either in the club or you're out of the club, and that can be really painful for a lot of people. So I'm not a big endorser of religion, but I do realize that for some people, it actually may even keep them from self-harm. So, we want people to stick around, because the longer we are around, the hope is there for help and for change and for growth. So thank you for asking me that question. What kind of feedback have you been receiving about your work so far, about this documentary in particular?
Well, I mean, so far, everyone who's seen it is liberal. So they're all like, yeah, this is great. But obviously, I would like to see more people watch it. Especially if they're more in the middle or conservative, so that it can, get the debate going, make them think about what they're doing. Because like I said, I made it to shame conservative Christians because if 80% of evangelicals are voting for Donald Trump, they are definitely not following the teachings of Jesus. So yeah, I'd like to see, more discussion, more even pushback from conservatives saying, hey, this isn't right. Jesus would never vote for a Democrat because Democrat has pro-choice in their platform. So, that would be interesting to hear and get that feedback from those folks. So, but overall, yeah, I think, everyone who has seen it loves it. But then again, the people that have seen it are liberal Christians or atheists.
Right. So I want people who are tuning in for this show today, I'd love for them to watch it with some of their more conservative relatives, or recommend it to their conservative loved ones, just as a conversation starter to see what each of them thinks about it. And we certainly will have better success if we approach people from a attitude of warmth and curiosity, rather than, name calling and all these things. And it can be so painful for people when religion and politics, because now they're so intertwined, divide families. When people, we're eventually soon we're going to be heading into the Thanksgiving season, and oh my gosh, it can just be so fraught. Family times, because we have the Brady Bunch ideal going on in our head. It's supposed to be like this and it's supposed to be like that. And reality is often so different when we're on such different sides. So I think it's really important that we are able to sit together and have conversations. But it's hard because these topics can get heated very quickly.
Well, and I would say, since you're bringing up Thanksgiving, I think the problem is that Trump is such an awful human being that before you go to Thanksgiving and you disagree on tax policy, you disagree maybe on healthcare, but your aunt and uncle didn't elect Donald Trump before. It was George W. Bush, a compassionate Christian. I don't agree with any of his policies, but he wasn't a rapist, a sexual predator.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't lie, whatever, the Washington Post, 300,000 times while he was in office, whatever it was. That's the problem, is that the Republicans put someone on the top of the ticket. That's insane. I mean, basically, he's a narcissist. He's got all these issues. He doesn't care about the United States. He only cares about himself. Because if someone was truly a patriot and was the president of the country, he wouldn't be running around, making the country almost divided because he's lying about election results. I mean, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens at Thanksgiving, is the fact that you've changed the whole dynamic. Now we're separating children from their parents at the border. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, as a liberal Christian or an atheist, that's not what good people do.
Right.
And you've got your relatives backing up those kinds of policies, and it's just so problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's more like the Antichrist than anybody else, I think, in the Bible. And it seems like he should be odious. He should be an odious stench in the nostrils of Jesus followers. So it makes me wonder: has Jesus been taken out of the Bible for these folks who claim to be Christians and who think that Trump is just the greatest thing ever and he's the one that's going to lead them to the promised land? It's been very interesting over the past few years to watch a cult arise in real time, the MAGA cult, and of course QAnon is infused in there, and conspiracy theories, and it's been really frustrating and really scary. And I do hope that we're coming to the end of it. But lots of people also say that Trump just took the lid off the pot to expose what's really there. And in some ways, I think that is also true, like that we were lulled into a false sense of how much we've evolved when President Obama was president, and it really seemed like we had turned a page and it felt really good. But guess what? There was still a lot going on underneath that we didn't want to see. So now how do we move forward, knowing even if, please, if Kamala Harris wins as the next president of the United States, there's still a sizable portion of the population in the United States who endorses not only Donald Trump, but his policies, his lies, the horrible things that he says, and whether he believes them or not, people still follow him. So I think about how are we going to cope with that moving forward. Do you have any ideas?
Well, I think atheists and liberal Christians have to hold conservative Christians accountable for what they've done over the last 10 or 12 years. And it's ironic, when the moral majority came to the fore politically, they were looking for candidates that lived Christ-like. All right. And it didn't really work out for them because a lot of politicians gave them lip service, especially on abortion, and just used their power to get elected. So they got tired of it. So they voted for someone who's nothing like Christ-like in Donald Trump, but gave them the power to overturn Roe v. Wade. And so conservative Christians have been exposed to be about power and not about Christ. And I think, like I said, atheists and liberal Christians need to hold them accountable. And that's the reason I made the documentary, just like, hey, you are not following the teachings of Christ, yet you are the most self-proclaimed Christ-like people. So that hypocrisy, and there's been plenty of books written about it, and evangelicals are leaving in droves. I just read the Ex-Evangelicals by Sarah McCammon, and it was an outstanding book to hear about people that were raised, homeschooled, Christian schools. They get out in the real world and they find out, this gay person is a nice person, good person. They're not good. I don't want them to burn in hell. So that's what I think needs to happen. Is I just think we need to hold them accountable and keep pointing these things out. And it is having a huge effect on their movement.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like the media has had a hard time actually focusing on the truth, because Trump is such an oversized figure, everywhere. And so they haven't been holding him accountable for his many, many, many lies and exaggerations and unkindness. I mean, Kamala Harris she really has to be working 4 times as hard to get, kind of equal airtime, and not just have them focus on, she's a woman, what did she wear, how did she sound, all these ridiculous, unfair things, hoops that women have to jump through. And it makes me think also, of course, of the patriarchy, speaking of conservative Christianity, and of the additional project that you're working on right now with Alpha God. That I cannot wait for that to come out. And Dr. Garcia is just a fantastic writer, and he's so smart. What was it like for you making that documentary? Was that something that you had wanted to make for a long time?
Actually, the abortion documentary I wanted to make for a long time. And I interviewed Dr. Hector Garcia for the abortion documentary, and that's how I met him, because he had written a book called Sex, Power, and Partisanship, trying to explain what was going on there. And, the basic idea is cultures and countries that are very conservative have the least equality for women. So the more conservative the political group, the more conservative religion, the more conservative the culture, less rights for women. And so you get into evolutionary psychology and you start understanding why this is all happening. Dr. David Buss, When Men Behave Badly, talks about, this is all about mating strategies. And it truly is. The reason why God is male is because he came to be, he was written in the world by males dealing with the issues that they were dealing with at that time. And people are, why is God jealous? Well, because the men were jealous, Why were women treated as property? Because the men treated women as property at that time. It's just painfully obvious when you start, pull the curtain back. So in our current politics and stuff that on the right, patriarchy is a huge issue. And, gay rights, birth control, trans are all threats to patriarchy. So that's why, whether it was biracial marriage 70 years ago, or why it was gay marriage, why it was trans bathroom, all this stuff is a threat to patriarchy. And that's why they fight so hard against it, because they're trying to control women.
Yes. And it seems like, and this is obviously really simplifying things, but there's a huge percentage of the population that fears change. Often we think of those people as being fundamentalists. And there's another huge segment that wants change, wants to continue moving forward. And they may have some reservations and concerns about it, but they are not trying to prevent it from happening. It's like fundamentalists, not only do they want to prevent change, they want to go backwards. And that's the problem, of course, right now with the stacked conservative Supreme Court in the United States as well. And that is just, it's so crazy what has gone on in the last few years in the United States. A lot of people definitely didn't see it coming, even though we've known the moral majority, I got my air quotes going there, have been working behind the scenes, evangelicals, to try and do exactly this, exactly what's happening. But we just didn't want to acknowledge it.
Well, I've got good news for you. It's not going to last.
Oh, yeah.
Because let's just take abortion, for example. 70% of Americans think abortion should be legal in some fashion. So because of those appointments on the Supreme Court, we're living in minority rule at the moment. It's not going to last. People are going to come around eventually and understand what's going on. A lot of the policies, it's like restricting women's right to go to a different state to have an abortion. I mean, that's insane. All this stuff is very, very unpopular. And it'll come back the other direction for sure. And, you just alluded to this, but the whole, make America great again. Yeah. Which time in history are you thinking of? Because, if you're thinking the 1950s and, church attendance was very high in the 50s and yada, yada. But boy, you wouldn't want to be a person of color or gay in the 1950s or in the 70s. So it's like, actually, we've gone backwards under Trump. We've gone a little bit forward under Biden, but we went way forward with Obama. And so actually, 2024 is the best America's actually ever been.
Wow.
For the most people, not the best for white people that think they're losing power, which they're not. It's just idiotic. It's just more people are getting equal rights. More people are getting to be their authentic selves. And the irony is that those things are not a threat to anybody, but they've been taught, and Trump is telling. They've been taught at church, and they've been taught by Trump that these things, you're about to lose something. Hey, attention, white people, you're about to lose something.
Oh, yeah. And it's easy to stir them up, stir people up to be fearful. Fear is absolutely contagious, but I will say so is courage. And so that's what we need people to be focusing on. But it's very hard because fear is so primal and so easy for us to get stirred up in. And I think when I'm looking at American politics and the situation it's in right now, the last desperate gasp of white evangelical patriarchal Christianity, and it has to break. It has to go. I think of the Nordic countries over in Europe. I was just in Sweden for the premiere of the Leaving Jesus documentary, which was really wonderful. But it seemed so different to be in a place that religion isn't even talked about. Sweden is highly atheistic, and people would kind of, look at you sideways if you were professing that, of course, you believe in this ancient book and these sorts of things that you take it literally. That just doesn't fly over there. And they are some of the most progressive nations in the whole world. Typically, it's much poorer countries than the United States that cling so desperately to religion, and I see why. If that it promises them eventual relief from their suffering, as it might explain to them why they're having to suffer, but that does not make sense in the United States at all.
Well, one thing that Trump did us all a favor is that he exposed everybody for who they really are. So you've got conservative Christians, evangelicals voting for Trump at an 80% clip. So it's obviously they're interested in power and not interested in Jesus. And so that's actually a good thing to expose that. And, we can, why would you vote for Trump? What are you doing? He's the least Christ-like. So that's a good thing. And also, exposing all the racism in America. So Trump in that regard did us a favor. So we still have a lot of work to do in that way. Also, Bill Zuckerman just released a video on YouTube, showing that the countries that are more religious they are, the worst outcomes they have as far as violence, murders, you name it. So those progressive countries, Scandinavian countries, are ahead of us for sure. And if you travel to Europe, you're like, oh man, this is great. All these, they pay more taxes than we do, but they have all this great stuff.
Yes. And, I watched I watched Phil's video just the other night and immediately reached out and asked him if he will come on the program. And so he will be a guest in the upcoming weeks. I really appreciate his voice as well. It's really a voice of reason. And that's what we need, because there is, as I said, so much fear when people are afraid that they are going extinct, and they're losing their power. And this is a natural thing that happens as we age too, regardless of what our background or heritage is. We get older and we become frailer. And I mean, people can hopefully think that they still want to come to us maybe for advice or this sort of thing, but the power that we have diminishes as we get older. And this is something that we've seen with President Biden. He seemed unwilling to hand over the keys, and then eventually he got to the point where he was ready to, and it was so powerful. It was the most powerful thing that he could do, was pass that torch. And it wasn't easy for him. It was painful, I'm sure, because he really does love the United States of America and the citizens of the United States of America. But he did the necessary thing. But people don't like to do that. And Christians don't like to think that their influence is slipping away either.
Well, the other, Christians, I had this conversation. There's also a podcast version now of the documentary series. And so it gets more in depth. It breaks down each episode. And so I was talking to one of the guests, Jimmy Itzhak, that when he was applying for a job, and he was a church director for church life at his church before this job, and they were like, "What kind of religion are you? This, that, and the other thing." It's like, no, we're liberal. We're social justice. Yada yada. So it's like, it's interesting how Christians think they're being attacked. And I asked him, I said, I don't think liberal Christians feel like they're being attacked. I definitely understand why conservative Christians think they're under attack, but actually nobody cares. You do your thing on Sunday and Wednesday. That's the great thing about America. We have freedom of religion, freedom of thought, and I'm not going to tell them what to do until they start doing stuff that's impacting the whole country or impacting other people's lives. You want to advocate for the people that they're trying to destroy, basically, or demonize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where I really appreciate Dan Barker and Annie Laurie Gaylor and their work with Freedom from Religion Foundation is just so important. And over the last few years, also seeing the Satanic Temple also taking up an important space on that stage, as far as what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Christians are going to get the 10 Commandments or whatever, then they have to agree to Baphomet or whatever else also being in plain public view, because the United States is not only made up of Christians or a Christian nation. There are people from every background, every belief system and ideology, including no belief in anything supernatural. And every citizen gets to have the same rights in the United States. We get to have freedom from religion if that's what we want. But that's the terrifying thing, I guess, that the white Christian nationalists want to impose a theocracy, essentially, on people. And that, I really think that is not going to fly. But in order for it to not fly, people have to get out and vote, and they're going to have to vote Democratic. It's not going to be enough for Christians to withhold their vote or spoil their vote because they don't want to vote Democrat. That's going to end up the country in a just as terrible place, I think, as if they did vote Republican. Do you think so?
Well, I think the funny part, every time Republicans go, well, I have to vote for Trump because how could I vote for a Democrat? And my joke to that is like, what, are you worried about someone getting health care? Is that your problem? It's like,
yeah. Is that a big threat to you?
If I vote for a Democrat, more people are going to get health care, or we're going to get better union jobs happening. It's a real, this is about feelings and not about facts. And it's interesting what kind of bedfellows you make in politics. Like I was saying, it's like atheists and liberal Christians join up together to fight, basically, at the voting booth against Republicans. And who are you getting in bed with if you're a Republican? You're getting in bed with racists, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, just the worst type of people, and also the worst kind of history in America. And that's who you're getting in bed with. So, that's what I want to try to point out in the documentary is like, these things matter. And you do have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why am I voting with these people?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband lived in Mississippi for 30 years before we got married, and he moved here. And he is a white male. He's older. He's 75. And Mississippi has some good things about it and some really, really hard things about it. And in fact, I found it really difficult to visit and spend time there because I just saw a lot of poverty and it felt like a lot of racial injustice. And I asked him, why did you stay even after your government job finished? Why did you stay in such a difficult place? And he said he felt that it was important for him to try and show people that not all old white men are terrible people. He would specifically learn the name of the postmistress and the clerks at the store and, just try and have kind interactions with them. And when we talked about, or we would look at what's going on in the United States and the rise of Trump and Trumpism and MAGA and all that, and he really is of the opinion that it's because after the Civil War, there wasn't enough done. That was still the Southerners were still allowed to foment all their ideas that were so unhealthy and so racist, and that's where this whole thing is coming out of. Do you think? Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%. And if you watch, in that realm, if people would watch the second episode of the documentary series, it's called American Jesus, White Supremacy. It goes into all of that and how the church played a huge role and how Jesus became white and also helped with the cause of segregation and racism and everything that happened in the South. But you're absolutely right. The post-Reconstruction of the South went south, unfortunately, when they decided to do electoral college and pulled the troops out of the South so that I forget who the presidency was tied, and so it totally messed up the South, and we're still living with it today. And in fact, we're still fighting the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we're doing it at the ballot box instead of physically doing it. But obviously, January 6th showed that those folks were willing to take up arms, and Trump obviously encouraged them to do that, and is definitely responsible for that. And that's the other thing, the crazy thing. Once January 6th happened, I was like, oh, this guy's, it's over for him. But now nobody even remembers less than 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he really is a master at manipulation and just really following Hitler's playbook to a T, as far as lie, attack, lie some more, raise your voice, and scare your opponents. And so I think he has met his match in a brown woman. It's so wonderful. Yes, one of my speakers at the conference on religious trauma on a couple of different occasions is another filmmaker. His name is Jeremiah Kamara, and he did a series on YouTube called Slave Sermons, and he is Black, and he talks a lot about the frustration of Black people in the United States also being tied in so closely with Christianity as far as a cultural, and he is really interesting to listen to and to watch. He's a very strong speaker. I really appreciate Jeremiah, so I want to give a shout out to him. And something else that we've been watching recently, very old series, I think from the 1980s, Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell on the power of myth. We're just watching the series again on Netflix. And it is so good and so interesting. And I think people would also appreciate that, the kind of folks who are going to be interested in the work that you're doing, because Joseph Campbell looked at mythology around the world and across every age, every culture. And by mythology, I mean religion as well. Beliefs that were just as important to that people group, they would have fought to the death for, some of those beliefs. And now we look back and go, that's crazy. That's obviously not real, because of course now we have science and technology, and we have a greater understanding of many of these things. But like you said, if we went to sleep tomorrow and we woke up and there was no religion, we would invent something pretty damn quick there, because it does seem to be a feature, I'll say almost a glitch in humans, to have this need. And I think it comes from fear of death. I think it's all terror management. We want to believe that there's a reason for everything, and that something better comes next, or something worse for our enemies.
Exactly. And along those lines of, in the South and with the church, how the church was involved, one of the contributors to the documentary is Edward J. Bloom. He's a history professor at San Diego State University, but he wrote The Color of Christ, the Son of God, and the Saga of Race in America. And I highly recommend that book to anybody, because it just goes into the whole history of the American Jesus and how that, impacted specifically the South and impacts our, politics today, for sure.
Oh, yeah. And
But
there's
very poignant stuff.
Yes. And there's another podcast also that you're probably familiar with, and other folks might be, Straight White American Jesus. And that's with Brad Onishi. Yeah, just a very interesting, very thought-provoking. There's a lot of really smart people out there looking into these things. People like you, people who know more than I do, certainly, about American history. And so I'm really glad that you are doing this work, because this is very important work to be doing, to shed a light on these things. Tell us a little bit more about the abortion documentary that's coming up. Were you looking at that before they overturned Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I think I've had that documentary in my head for at least 10 years, if not more. Just the fact that you can see the hypocrisy over trying to protect the fetus, but not caring about the baby. It's like you're voting against choice, but you're voting against taxes being raised to help women that are pregnant with prenatal care. You're voting against helping kids have a free lunch. The CHIP program that the Republicans are always trying to get rid of, that helps kids. So it's that hypocrisy, that you're just like, what are you guys doing?
Yes.
And so I wanted to point that out. And then after, reading more evolutionary psychology, it became really obvious that the documentary was going to be about that as well, and how men are trying to control women. And in present day, like I said before, the conservative countries, the conservative religions, the women have the less equality. And so that's all about patriarchy. That's about mating strategies, mate guarding, all that kind of stuff that goes on. And that's what it's all about. It's about controlling women. It's not about the fetus.
Wow.
So yeah. And it's about protecting patriarchy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And when I think back to my own Christian days, and when my oldest daughter was in junior high youth group, and we all went and stood across from the hospital and did our anti-abortion protests there. So in Canada, there's laws about how close protesters can be to, and so they can't be on the property. They can only be like across the street or whatever, which I'm very thankful for now. But I remember being out there and standing and feeling so passionate. We got to save those babies. We got to save those babies. And now, of course, I've done a complete turnaround on that whole issue. Partly because of what you're saying. It's they're caring about the fetus, but not for the baby and the child afterwards. And certainly they are not caring about the woman or even the girl who is pregnant, and who a lot of times has been impregnated against her will in cases of rape, and of course incest. And there's just so much difficulty there. It's a very it's a very big time in a person's life when they are pregnant. There's lots going on. And the one thing they don't need is pressure from outside sources and having their own bodily autonomy stripped away. I frankly couldn't believe that women and men didn't take to the streets in the United States with pitchforks and lanterns when Roe v. Wade was overturned, because it's so horrifying. But I think we're moving in that direction where that's going to be rectified and things are going to be solidified into law that need to be. And that Supreme Court is going to have to be addressed. The shenanigans going on over there.
Well, the people did get out in the streets, but they didn't have pitchforks. They went to the voting booths. My state of Kansas and other conservative states like Ohio, they approved abortion access as a state constitutional amendment. That's how unpopular this is when you get a red state like Kansas and Ohio passing those bills or making those amendments, I should say.
Wow. Way to go. That's wonderful. Yes.
Well, and
go on.
The other part about the abortion documentary, there will be a segment on, the emphasis on virginity for women, not for men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so how that all plays out. And that obviously, once you read anything about evolutionary psychology, you understand the problem that men have always faced of paternity uncertainty and, mate guarding and, the weird thing, Hector brought this up in the trailer that, ISIS brought in gynecologists to check on the women that they captured in, I don't know what part, it was in Iraq or what part of the Middle East that ISIS was in at the moment. It could have been Syria. But that's how crazy these conservative religions are, or conservative cultures, that they are that worried about whether a woman is a virgin or not.
Wow.
So there will be a big part on that, because that obviously goes into the control of women. And, it's the Republicans in the United States, if they could ban birth control, they would do that. They've gone as far as, Hobby Lobby can't, doesn't have to give this type of birth control, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not their business.
Mm-hmm.
They would take away birth control if they thought they could get away with it. And they've obviously, here's the funny thing. It's about states' rights. All right. We're sending Roe v. Wade back to the states to decide. And then the next thing they say, well, we're going to do a national federal ban on abortion. Oh, I thought you said it was about states' rights. And, it's like, oh, we're saving the fetus. Well, we don't care about the child. Or, we don't. I think the biggest indictment of Republican policy in that regard is what they've done to these women in Texas that wanted to have the child. This was not about abortion. This was about a problem with their pregnancy. And they had to leave the state. It's not, they don't care about the woman. This woman could die. But yet they'd rather have the woman die than see her have an abortion.
Wow.
And that is about control. That is not about the fetus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's a sad commentary, but it illustrates what this is really about. And it's not about the fetus. It is not about the fetus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I saw a really chilling commercial recently. I wonder if it was put out by Midas Touch or one of those groups. And it was
I saw that, yeah.
the man driving his teenage daughter. They're just in their car. They seem to be having a nice conversation, and they're pulled over by a sheriff or a police officer of some sort. And he happens to know that the policeman knows that the daughter has missed her period. And, where are they going right now? It looks like in the GPS, they put that they're going out of state and all this kind of stuff. It was chilling. It was absolutely Handmaid's Tale next level stuff. And I felt that, I hope that shows everywhere. That was a really important commercial. And shout out to one of my former guests, Margaret Atwood, author of The Handmaid's Tale. She called it all those years ago. She had a feeling about what was going on and potentially what was to come. We're coming to the end of our time together. I want to make sure again that people know the names of your series. What Would Jesus Do on Election Day? Currently available at www.wisecounsellor.com. www.wwjd.vote. And then America's Abortion Fetish. Conservatives need to control women and uphold patriarchy. The trailer is at abortionfetish.com. And then, of course, Alpha God, that we talked so much about today as well. The trailer is available at alphagod.world. And I have some websites here from you: micklarson.org, wwjd.vote, abortionfetish.com, alphagod.world. I'm going to have those links also in the show notes. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, or just encourage people to watch your show?
I think one of the conclusions that I've came to from making the documentary and also making the podcast is that Jesus can be whatever you want him to be. And my version of Jesus is a liberal Jesus, is a Jesus that cares about everybody and that we're all God's children. If you want to believe in that and take Christ as your savior, then I like the liberal Jesus. But at the end of the day, religion is a tool that people use as a power dynamic to control other people, to get things accomplished that they want to accomplish. And that's, after doing all this work, I mean, that's what it's all about to some degree. And that's what religion is. And that, unfortunately, and to me, that's part of the bad news of the documentary, is that Jesus can be whatever you want him to be. And someone in the documentary, one of the professors, makes a really good point. If you ask someone, tell me what you think of Jesus, you'll be hearing what they think of Jesus, not what they read about Jesus, or not what Jesus was telling everybody. So that would be my parting thing to say, is like, be careful, always question, because Jesus can be almost anything to some people. So.
Wow. Yes. Important thoughts. Thank you very much, Mick Larson. Thanks for joining me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit and learning about some of the work that you're doing. And I hope our paths will cross again.
Thanks, Janice. I appreciate it. And I really hope we come back and talk about the abortion documentary and talk about Alpha Guy, because I think everybody will really enjoy those as well.
I agree. And thank you for tuning into the show today. You can go to my website, divorcingreligion.com. And don't forget about the Shameless Sexuality Life After Purity Culture Conference happening in Seattle in 2025. Go to shamelesssexuality.org. Thanks, everyone. Take care.